Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. We're diving into the world of education this time around. And I don't know about you, but these first few weeks of 2025 kind of feel like they should be about 6 months long at this point. Really, just between that New Year's Eve attack down in New Orleans and those fires in LA, then you've got the school shooting in Nashville, all the TikTok ban stuff, and the AI anxieties. It seems like you refresh the news and there's another like four new things that you got to try and figure out what to do with. And so on top of everything else, we have a whole storm brewing around education, calls to like dismantle the Department of Education, federal funds being frozen, and a flood of executive orders. So for this deep dive, we're going to try to cut through the noise a little bit. We're going to use this blog post by Dr. Howie Knoff. He's the founder of Project HE's Educational Solutions. And he's really urging educators to kind of hit the reset button and focus on what actually drives student success. We're going to unpack his insights and ask, are these political directives actually like impacting classrooms? What are the biggest distractions to learning right now? And how can we build these walls that Dr. North talks about to safeguard education? But most importantly, what do you need to know to kind of navigate this landscape? So Dr. Knopf starts off by reminding us that the whole point of education is to prepare students for a successful future. And a big part of that is being able to support yourself financially. He points to this study out of Houston that I think really puts things into perspective.
Yeah, so this study followed students who graduated between 2012 and 2017. They kind of tracked them through high school and into their early careers. They were trying to see, how they were doing and how they fared. And what they found was that only 1 in 5 graduates from the class of 2017 were actually earning a living wage 6 years later.
Wow, 1 in 5. That's a pretty stark statistic. And it goes on to show that those who earned a post-secondary credential, whether that's a bachelor's degree or some kind of professional certificate, they were significantly more likely to hit that living wage benchmark. So it really begs the question, are we doing enough to equip students for that next level?
And that's the whole point. Those K through 12 years, they're so important. I mean, think about it. Did you have access to challenging coursework? Did you feel like you were being pushed to excel? They found that early exposure to advanced classes, particularly doing well in 8th grade reading, was a strong indicator of future earnings potential.
Interesting. So are we setting kids up for success or what?
Well, Dr. Knopf, he brings up the latest NAEP scores. It's called the Nation's Report Card.
Yeah.
And the picture it paints isn't exactly encouraging. Both 4th and 8th grade reading scores have dipped since the last assessment, which just continues a downward trend we've been seeing for about a decade. In math, 4th graders, they saw a small improvement, but 8th grade scores are just stagnant. What's even more worrisome is that the achievement gap in 8th grade math, it's wider than ever.
Yeah, those declining scores, particularly in reading, I think they raise some important questions. Dr. Nafi argues that part of the problem stems from all these distractions and disruptions we've been talking about. Instead of laser focusing on those core academic skills and trying to foster real engagement, are we getting sidetracked? Are we getting sidetracked by political controversies? Are we constantly battling the allure of cell phones? Right, and that's where this idea of a safety net comes in that Dr. Knopf talks about. He uses this analogy of building walls to shield learning from these distractions. So let's start with the political side of things. There's been a lot of talk, even a recent executive order, about banning schools from teaching what they're calling discriminatory equity ideology. This order threatens to pull federal funding if schools teach that America is inherently racist or that any group is inherently oppressed. It's stirred up quite a hornet's nest, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why this order is causing so much concern, but what's interesting is that there's actually quite a bit of research that challenges the premise of this order. Like, for instance, the American Historical Association, they did a huge study back in 2022 looking at how U.S. history is being taught in all 50 states. They found that for the most part, high school history teachers are doing a professional job. They're focused on helping students understand key historical events, including those complex legacies of racism and slavery. But they're not like engaging in indoctrination or pushing a particular political agenda.
So it seems like they're sticking to teaching history rather than trying to push an agenda. That's reassuring to hear. And it's not just the AHA study. There was a survey done in 2022 by the University of Southern California. They were exploring public attitudes towards teaching controversial topics in schools. And what I found interesting was that the vast majority of people surveyed, including a large percentage of Republicans, they actually supported teaching about things like slavery, women's contributions, racial inequality, even gun control and abortion at the high school level. Now, there was less support for those topics in elementary school, but overall, the survey suggests that people are more open to discussing these complex issues than some of the political rhetoric might lead you to believe.
And there's also a study from the winter 2025 issue of Education Next that directly tackled this question of so-called woke indoctrination in schools. They surveyed over 850 high school students nationwide. What they found was that while some concepts related to critical race theory are being taught, it's not nearly as widespread as some people claim. About 40% of teachers use terms like white privilege and systemic oppression, and about a third of students reported frequently hearing that America is fundamentally racist. But here's the key takeaway. The study also found that students felt comfortable sharing their own opinions, even if they disagreed with what was being taught. And their political beliefs, they were shaped more by their family and friends and social media than by their teachers. So it seems like maybe this whole discriminatory equity ideology panic is a bit of a red herring. Perhaps that's not the biggest threat to learning after all.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But even if this order is based on these unfounded fears, wouldn't you say it still creates a climate of anxiety and pressure for school administrators? They might feel like they have to react even if the research suggests there's no real problem to address.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, we can't just dismiss these political distractions entirely, even if they seem misguided. It's definitely something to keep in mind, especially if you're working in a school environment or you have kids in school. I mean, how is this playing out in your community, and what kind of concerns do you have?
Yeah, that's a really important question for all of us to consider. But speaking of distractions, Dr. Knopf talks about building another wall. And this one hits close to home for all of us. The wall against cell phones. And this one, well, it feels a lot more personal, doesn't it? I mean, just think about how many times you've checked your phone already today. It's practically an involuntary reflex at this point.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what makes it such a problem. That constant urge to check notifications, to scroll through social media is just this major drain on our attention. And there's research that shows a strong link between cell phone use and difficulties with focused learning, even social interactions.
Yeah, it's like 237 notifications a day. It's just mind-blowing. No wonder it's so hard for people to focus. Do you ever feel like just bombarded by notifications? It's like this constant stream of interruptions. According to the Pew Research Center, pretty much every teenager has a smartphone these days. And Common Sense Media found that kids are spending an average of like 33 minutes on their phones during school hours. That's like a whole class, period.
And it's not just students who are starting to see this as a problem. The Pew Research Center also found that a majority of parents, like around 65%, they actually support banning cell phones during class time. And a whopping 90% of teachers who were surveyed by the National Education Association, they're in favor of policies that restrict phone use during instruction.
Wow, so what are schools doing about it? It seems like more and more states and districts are starting to take action. Some are implementing full-blown bans, either for the entire school day or just during class. Others are taking a more flexible approach, allowing phones during breaks, but requiring them to be put away during lessons.
Yeah, and what's really important, regardless of the specific approach, is consistency and clear consequences. The schools that have seen the most positive results are the ones that have implemented their policies district-wide, with all the teachers on board and clear expectations for students.
And there are some pretty impressive success stories out there. Like, for example, a school district in North Adams, Massachusetts, they saw a 75% drop in disciplinary referrals after they implemented a phone ban. They also reported that students were more engaged and teachers were able to get through lessons more quickly.
Oh, yeah. And another great example is Bentonville, Arkansas. They piloted a phone ban in one of their high schools. And at the end of the year, they surveyed the teachers. And get this, 86% of teachers reported seeing an improvement in student engagement. And there were also significant reductions in aggressive behavior and even drug-related offenses, which the school attributed to students no longer being able to use their phones to arrange drug deals.
Wow, those are some pretty dramatic results. But I gotta imagine it's not always easy to get everybody on board with these changes. I mean, we're talking about breaking deeply ingrained habits here. It's like asking people to give up coffee.
You're absolutely right. It's not easy at all. Behavioral science tells us that when you try to eliminate a behavior that's been strongly reinforced, you're likely to see what's called an extinction burst. It's like that last-ditch effort to get the reward. In this case, that little dopamine hit from checking your phone.
So how do you overcome that? How do you get past that initial resistance?
Yeah, well, it takes a multifaceted approach. Consistent consequences are key, like we mentioned before. But it's also crucial to teach students strategies for managing those urges. Things like role-playing, where they practice resisting that impulse to check their phone. Or deep breathing exercises, positive self-talk. These can all be helpful tools. It's about giving them a sense of control,
Yep. It sounds like a lot of work, but those results in Bentonville and North Adams, they speak for themselves. And it's not just about academic performance, is it? It's also about reclaiming those face-to-face interactions, fostering genuine connections in a world that's increasingly dominated by screens. So let's circle back to Dr. Knopf's overall message for a moment. He acknowledges the challenges facing education, the declining public satisfaction, the pressure from political forces. Yet he also strikes this note of optimism. He emphasizes the professionalism and dedication of so many educators out there. I mean, think about the teachers you've known. Or maybe you are a teacher. They're in the trenches day in and day out doing incredibly important work.
And this is where that Gallup poll you mentioned earlier comes in. While public satisfaction with education might be at like a low point nationally, there's often this disconnect between how people view the education system as a whole and how they view their own local schools. Parents especially, they tend to have a much more positive view of the schools their own children attend.
Right, that makes sense. So what does that tell us?
I think it tells us that despite all the negativity swirling around education, there are countless educators out there doing amazing work day after day. They're the ones focused on quality instruction, student engagement, preparing kids for success at the next level. Dr. Knopf's call to build walls is really about protecting those core values from all the distractions and negativity that threaten to undermine them.
So what resonates with you about that idea? Do you see examples of this wall building in your own community?
Yeah, it's about regaining control over what happens in our schools and classrooms. Instead of getting swept up in the latest political drama or tech trends, it's about focusing on the things that we know actually make a difference in a student's life.
He's really passionate about that idea of quality instruction, isn't he? He's saying, hey, enough with the distractions. Let's get back to basics, and remember why we're here in the first place. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think we've kind of lost sight of what truly matters in education?
Absolutely. And he's not the only one saying this. Remember that Houston study we were talking about earlier? The one that showed such a strong correlation between challenging coursework and future earnings. I think that study is like a powerful testament to the impact of effective teaching. When students are engaged in rigorous material, when they're encouraged to think critically and push their boundaries, it really pays off in the long run.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, right? Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. But in this case, it's more like teach student to think critically, solve problems, and communicate effectively. And you equip them for a lifetime of success.
I love that analogy. It really highlights the need for a well-rounded education, one that goes beyond just memorizing facts and, acing standardized tests. It's about cultivating curiosity, nurturing creativity, fostering a genuine love of learning. It's about preparing students not just for jobs, but for fulfilling lives.
And that's where this whole building walls metaphor becomes so powerful. It's about creating a safe and supportive space where learning can thrive. Free from distractions and negativity, whether it's the political storms brewing outside the classroom or the siren song of a smartphone. Those walls, they help protect what's truly important. So what would those walls look like in your ideal learning environment?
Imagine a school where the focus is on deep thinking and meaningful discussions, where students feel empowered to ask questions and challenge assumptions, where technology is used strategically to enhance learning, not to hijack attention. That's the kind of environment that allows students to truly flourish.
It sounds amazing, but creating that kind of culture takes effort, doesn't it? It's not something that happens overnight.
You're right. It requires a shift in mindset, a commitment from everyone involved. Educators need to feel supported and empowered to create engaging lessons that spark curiosity. Parents need to be partners in the learning process, encouraging their kids to explore new ideas and take academic risks. And students need to be active participants, not just passive consumers of information.
It's a collective responsibility for sure, but it's also incredibly empowering, isn't it? Knowing that we have the ability to shape the learning environment, to create those protective walls and foster a culture of academic excellence, it's about taking ownership and saying we're not going to let distractions derail our children's education.
Absolutely, and that's why I find Dr. Knopf's message so inspiring. He's not just pointing out the problems, he's offering a solution. He's reminding us that we have the power to make a difference, to reclaim the narrative around education.
Yeah, it's about shifting the focus away from all the negativity, and those attention-grabbing headlines, and really shining a light on the incredible work that's happening every day in classrooms across the country. It's about celebrating the dedication of teachers, the resilience of students, and the transformative power of education itself. So what are some of the positive stories that you're seeing in your own community? Who are the educators and students who are making a difference?
I think it's important to acknowledge the challenges, But it's equally important to celebrate the successes. There are so many inspiring stories out there. Teachers who are going above and beyond to create engaging learning experiences, students who are overcoming obstacles and achieving their dreams. We need to amplify those voices, share those stories, because they're a reminder that despite all the noise, education is still a powerful force for good.
And that even in the face of challenges, there's a lot to be hopeful about.
Absolutely, and that hope stems from the knowledge that we have the tools, we have the resources and the collective will to make a difference. It's about believing in the potential of every student and committing to creating a learning environment where that potential can be fully realized. And it all comes down to choices. What do we choose to prioritize? What do we choose to invest in? Those choices, they're going to determine the future of education.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Knopf's call to action, let's take a moment to reflect on some of the key takeaways. First and foremost, it's about focusing on what truly matters for student success. Quality instruction, student engagement, fostering a love of learning. Those are the foundations, the things that have always been at the heart of great education.
And secondly, it's about approaching information with a critical eye, questioning assumptions, seeking out evidence-based perspectives, whether it's a political directive or a sensational headline. We have a responsibility to dig deeper and evaluate the validity of what we're being told. Don't just accept things at face value. Be a critical consumer of information.
And finally, it's about taking action, building those walls to protect learning from distractions, advocating for policies that support educators and students, and creating a culture of learning that values curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. So what's one specific action that you can take today to make a difference in your own sphere of influence?
Think about your own role in the education ecosystem. Are you a parent, a teacher, a community member? Each of us has a part to play in shaping the future of education. It might be something as simple as having a conversation with your child about the importance of focusing during class, or volunteering your time at a local school, or speaking up in a school board meeting. Every action, no matter how small, can contribute to creating a more positive and productive learning environment.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together, and that even small actions can have a ripple effect. So let's go out there and be the change we want to see in education. Let's build those walls, protect that learning space, and empower the next generation to reach their full potential.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming sometimes,
Yeah.
It's about finding those small wins, those moments where you can make a tangible difference. Maybe it's about setting some boundaries around your own phone use, or maybe it's about having those tough conversations about what really matters in education. We can all play a part in building those walls.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming our attention, reclaiming those spaces where learning can actually thrive. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Connect with other educators, parents, community members, anyone who shares your passion for education. Share what you're learning, support each other's efforts, and build those walls together brick by brick.
I love that image, building those walls together brick by brick. It's a powerful reminder that change doesn't happen in isolation. It takes a collective effort. A shared vision, and a whole lot of heart.
And a willingness to keep learning and growing, to question our assumptions and embrace new ideas, to stay engaged and informed even when the world feels chaotic and overwhelming.
So to everyone listening out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of education. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Keep those conversations going, keep those questions coming, and most importantly, keep believing in the power of education to shape a brighter future. Until next time.